Good morning, everyone. And yeah, it's great to be here this morning. As Pete said, my name is Naomi Davies, and I'm joined by my colleague Becky Davies as well on the call. We're both from the South Central People and Places team at Natural Resources Wales. And today we're really excited to share with you some new visualizations that we've developed in terms of bringing greener towns and cities to life. So, just to jump in straight away, in terms of what are we doing and what are these new tools, as Pete said, a picture paints 1,000 words, that age-old saying, and, people often respond really favorably to visual content. The visualizations that have been designed around green infrastructure add to an existing suite of visualizations, and I've just put a few snippets of those existing visualizations that have been developed by colleagues and partners on the screen. So you can see ones around wildfire and wildfire management, but also around dark skies. So there's a before and after of the dark skies visualization that was developed. And that actually went into part of the Welsh Government Good Practice Guidance on dark skies. So yeah, there was a bit of a gap around the urban environment and urban habitats, and I've been doing quite a lot of work with urban ecosystems myself, so it felt like a good opportunity to create these visualizations around that. And I should say they're guidance, they're best practice, they're not statutory documents, but hopefully useful guides. So before I go into the actual visualizations in more detail, just a bit of background around, why they matter and why they're important, certainly for us in South Central. So in terms of legislation in Wales and policy, there's a strong context around nature and people thriving together. And, our purpose as Natural Resources Wales is to pursue the sustainable management of natural resources. And a big part of that is building resilient ecosystems and also the services and benefits they provide. So, we're talking about South Central, the area that we work in, which is, I think, around 6% of the landmass, but has 29% of the population. So it's a heavily urbanized area, but with the potential for lots of services and benefits from these resilient ecosystems. Because it's a largely urban area as well, there are lots of complex pressures and challenges. So ones that I suppose we're all aware of, pollution, increased development, aging infrastructure, and also physical modifications and urban diffuse pollution. Also, many of our urban areas do see higher levels of health deprivation, but also lots of opportunities and potential for change, really. So they have a really important role to play, urban environments, so urban ecosystems in climate resilience, in nature's recovery, and also in minimizing pollution. So as a team, there are clear drivers around producing or having greener towns and cities associated, with Water Framework Directive, like I say, climate resilience, local flooding issues, and urban biodiversity as well. And Becky and I, the team that we sit in, deals with their South Central Wales area statement, which identifies opportunities and issues within the area. There's 5 themes within that area statement that are building resilient ecosystems, connecting people with nature, working with water, and improving health and air quality. So green infrastructure ties really heavily into that, and it's a mechanism for delivery of our area statement as well. A bit around the visualizations themselves, and then how we got from sort of beginning to end. So when I decided I wanted to do the visualizations, I'd spoken to a couple of people within NRW who'd done them before. And in terms of the visualizations themselves, I wanted them to depict a South Central environment, but not to be an obvious place. I didn't want them to look like Cardiff. I wanted them to be able to represent towns and cities across our South Central urban area. And then when thinking about the scope as well, obviously that's budget dependent. We had a budget of £5,000 for this piece of work. And, I was able to produce a series of images, which I will show you in a second, with that budget. I think as well, it was important to consider, were there any key messages I wanted to get across or key aspects to highlight in these pictures, because that might depict whether something's centerfold or whether it's in the back, or how the pictures are put together. And there was a lot of discussion with colleagues as well around this, in terms of what we wanted the pictures to be able to show. I then worked closely with a great landscape architect who might be on the call, Rob Colburn, to produce these images. So we started off pulling pictures together from Google Maps, or just pictures from the South Central area, and the pictures then sort of built up into these visualizations. We were sort of storyboarding a little bit, and lots of drafts or iterations were sent back and forth. We worked together for about 3 months, but intermittently to pull these together. And there were lots of different versions. I could have input from everything to the colours, to where people were, to how they were interacting with the space, and like I say, to what was in the foreground, what was in the background. And then when it gets to the final stages, there's an opportunity to have annotations. So, what did we want those annotations to say, etc. So this is the first visualization that I wanted to show you. So this is a before image of an urban environment. I know it looks really grey, but it is meant to depict something that we would normally see. It is meant to depict a typical urban environment in South Central, and to highlight, missed opportunities or challenges within such an environment. I've included just a snapshot of a couple of, towns within the area, so for a comparison there. But yeah, the idea is that it's representative, and this environment, it's not overly supportive of habitat connectivity. It's not providing much in terms of services and benefits for people, or well adapted to climate change. It doesn't, for me, it's not an enticing place to necessarily want to go, and so I've tried to capture that where we see businesses to let, etc. And then you've also got the urban watercourse running through, which is underloved, and disconnected from the community. And in comparison, we have this picture, and this is the after, and this is exactly the same place as we've just seen, but where we've introduced good quality, well-managed green infrastructure and interventions. So it's designed to show the art of the possible. It is bold, but it's not unachievable, and it's not unrealistic. And again, there's the pictures to the right there of the image show real life examples of this kind of thing. I think the top one's in Seoul and the bottom one's Salzburg. But yeah, showing green and blue infrastructure, providing multiple benefits. So how it's supporting biodiversity, health and well-being of people, also providing water quality and quantity improvements, and flood management as well. But like I say, the structures and the picture itself remains largely unchanged. It's just adding this blue and green infrastructure and showing what could be there. In terms of the numbers then, so that marries up with the annotations I was talking about at the bottom. So that just highlights where interventions are, around water quality and quantity, and around sort of biodiversity and connectivity. So yeah, they're at the bottom of the picture. So yeah, hopefully that, I'll just move on to the next slide where you'll be able to see them sort of side by side there, which I think is quite a good visual in terms of, the before and after. these are obviously macro, sort of a macro scale, but there's nothing to say that interventions or, you know, little bits can't be done as and when they're needed to be done. So small benefits or small improvements, making larger benefits over time. And with this sort of thing as well, you know, I think it's important to link in with the work that's already going on in the area. So it's whether or not there are any existing campaigns, or, you know, is there a nature recovery action plan, and, you know, how it all ties in. So having those collective conversations at the start to maximize the benefits, really. Yeah, and as I said, these are suggestions or guides. They're meant to be inspirational, really. So when using them, you can take bits of what you want and what will work. You know, considering what you want to achieve, what you want the impacts to be, etc. And then, so following on from those larger pictures, I also developed 4 further visualizations with Rob. And these, I think, are quite good because they take the discussions elsewhere. They, you know, perhaps attract different audiences. So in the left, we've got urban gardening or urban gardens. The right, we've got urban rivers. In the left there, you've got sedge planters being used in a fairly small urban space, perhaps in the middle of the city. And then we've got an example of a green bus stop as well. So, you know, I should say, again, with the development of these to the next stage, I think it's important to get the right technical expertise in the room to make sure that the designs are right for the specific environment that you're working in. I'm not sure how I'm doing for time, but I will pass over to Becky now. Becky, I don't know if you can hear me okay.
I can hear you. I'm hoping everybody can hear me. I'm not going to turn my camera on to jinx my Wi-Fi connection, so I will crack on.
Becky. I'll just move on to your slide. So yeah, Becky's going to talk about how the visualizations can be brought to life in a bit of a case study. So thanks very much, Becky.
Thank you, Naomi. So this is a case study in the Nant Morlais, which is a urban river that runs through the centre of Merthyr. And you can sort of see from this picture, it's a pretty unseen, undervalued and challenging watercourse that runs right through the heart of Merthyr town. And it looks pretty grey, and it's not part of the community. In contrast, we have a picture here from Strasbourg. We also have a picture from Cadiz in Liechtenstein. These are my family holiday snaps, never off work, but just showing that in, you know, very urban, busy centres, you know, a river can be very much, you know, an integral part of the landscape, and it doesn't need to be a problem. It's actually an asset. Next slide, please, Naomi. So when we looked at the Nant Morlais and we looked at Merthyr Town Centre, we, first of all, I wanted to sort of identify what are the environmental challenges in that place. So when we look at water quality, it's failing for Water Framework Directive. We have point source impacts, we have misconnections, we have a lot of, you know, sort of that urban creep, lots of concrete. So all of it just flows directly off the street, bringing all that rubbish into our rivers. We have lots of incidents there, so it takes up an awful lot of our time going to investigate these watercourses, and it's a dying watercourse as a consequence. Significant urbanisation, it is a lot of urban environment around it, so we see that habitat fragmentation, lots of new physical modifications happening all the time, and then that all exacerbates that sort of urban runoff. We have surface water flooding issues because there's no infiltration, there's no attenuation across that urban environment. And really importantly, this is a community hub. This is, you know, this is the birth of the Industrial Revolution here. It is a health deprived, it's an economically deprived community, lots of antisocial behaviours. and it's a dying high street. So, one of the things we wanted to do was, how do we use green infrastructure to revitalise the townscape as well. Next slide, please, Naomi. So taking all those environmental challenges, so what we needed to do there was to slow flows, to attenuate flows. We're basically applying natural flood management techniques, but in the urban environment, recognizing we're not going to dig up roads, we're not going to take away buildings, but what sort of small things can we do that would add to the environmental quality, but also add to the amenity and aesthetic value of the place as well. And recognizing that these, it's a challenge to do in such an urban environment, particularly where you do have antisocial behaviours and things like that. So working with the community, working with the local authority as well, to sort of what is the art of the possible, and really tapping into what are those challenges from a practical perspective. So putting in things like pocket parks, rainscapes, dotted throughout that throughout the town, but not taking away parking situation, not taking away, sort of the practical, pragmatic use of the place, but actually adding to it and making it more of a desired place to go. So that was the challenge, but we've designed something which we hope does add to that water benefit and that environmental benefit. It's not going to solve all the problems, but with the standard sort of nature-based solutions approach or natural flood management, it's many small interventions will make a added in combination effect. So that was the sort of ambition for this place, to be as practical as possible. So yeah, we've designed this scheme, and we're going through the process now of sharing it with the community, and identifying opportunities so we can build it into regeneration. And the visualizations that Naomi's put together is really going to sort of set to help us have that public conversation, that conversation with the commercial high street as well, to really sell it, because anything that we do must be done with the community and not to the community. So that's the ambition, and we hope that we will be successful, and this is a really good tool for us to do that. That's me. Thank you, Naomi.
Thanks, Becky. That's us, Pete. I can't see anyone's faces, but hopefully that was about 20 minutes. So there's some questions here which I thought might be useful to form part of the discussion.
Naomi, Becky, thank you so much. That was exactly 20 minutes. And
wow.
That's first. Yeah.
So despite all the issues with Becky's Wi-Fi,
yeah, thank you for being patient with me.
And may I say that example from Becky just really brought everything to life. I've lived with these visualizations ever since you first introduced me to them, Naomi, and then to actually see them being used in real life with a real community, it's great. So so let's have a look. We've got some questions in the chat. So Nigel Pugh has posted an image of from Tree Equity. Nigel, would you like to unmute yourself and turn your camera on and talk us through what you've put in the chat?
I worked with through the Woodland Trust, their Ignite Innovation Program, and it was the platform that was sponsored by us was an Instagram account called Nature Openata. And they were very much looking to work with young artists or youths to co-produce or to match them up with environmental NGOs to do that creative input from a young person's perspective.
Okay.
So the person I was working with, I helped them visualize Tree Equity delivered. And I mean, the actual final image is not the ideal scenario that I would have envisaged, because I was expecting tree equity to be in somewhere like Splot, where there was a really low tree cover. Um, but they'd gone for more of a valleys type location, which wasn't inappropriate in the end whatsoever. Um, but the whole process of working with that young person, helping them to envisage 50 years' time somewhere that had uh, climate adaptation alongside when you just delivered something like tree equity, was a very powerful process in the way, and a very powerful positive process in the way that it kind of alleviated um, young people's eco anxiety, climate doomism, or not being able to understand even what a positive climate adapted community in the future could actually look like. And this is where visualization is really powerful. And it always has been very powerful. I mean, Pete, you might have seen in the past, a long time ago, a visualization of Great Ormond Street, that was greened up essentially, against the current image of it as being a very grey, cold, hard, car-centric kind of environment. Always these kind of visualizations through social channels, no matter what those channels are, if it's impactful, done well, and particularly if it's inclusive, as in co-produced, there's a lot of powerful outcomes from it. Um, get a lot of traction with people, because again, seeing that picture, if you don't understand what something looks like, how do you get there? How do you realize what it is? And they do speak 1,000 words. Um, and I strongly want to go back to, I started the conversation with the Young Farmers Club about visualizing a climate resilient farm of the future. From the voice of the young farmers, what would that farm look like in co-production? With somebody like Code Cadu, myself, and maybe other, trusted ENGOs as such. Again, that voice of young farmers speaking to their peers, speaking to the succession of farming. It's a very powerful way to campaign. It's a very powerful way to bring people with you. Um, Essentially, that's my point really. But again, whenever we have done visualizations, we did it in the treescapes, one of our programs of work, where we simply visualized a valley that had transitioned through 50 years of additional tree cover, appropriate targeted tree cover. And again, it's a piece of work that's resonated right through the Woodland Trust. People get it, people understand it. It's been a tool that's been there for a long time. It's really been underutilized, that creative visualization, but the co-production of the way that it enables other people to kind of get a grips with, what this positive outcome can look like. That's about it, really.
Nigel, thank you so much. There's an awful lot in there, and that speaks to a lot of the questions that Naomi's just put up on the screen. DNE Evans, I'm not quite sure who you are, but could you unmute yourself and put your camera on? Because you've raised a really interesting point about something that you're up to in Carmarthenshire.
Apologies, I've got a poor connection here too. Can you all hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great. I've really enjoyed looking at those photographs. We've been developing the kernel of an idea in Carmarthenshire to basically transform our dead, hard, grey urban car parks into an energy generation hubs using solar canopies, but not traditional steel solar canopies, but working with wood knowledge wheels, etc., to use Welsh timber, Welsh Douglas fir to produce those structures. And we're very, very keen to incorporate into the project sustainable urban drainage, greening, basically anything you can think of, power generation, EV charging, e-bike charging, rainwater harvesting, for use by public conveniences and town centre watering. Thinking to the future, bringing in urban trees and using the water that hits those car parks as a resource to look after those urban trees going forward, rather than pump the water out of the local river in the summer. And we're currently at the stage where we need to produce a visualization of this kernel of an idea, to sell it internally, and to position ourselves ready for any upcoming grant monies that may be available. We're also thinking along the lines of urban heat islands and the effect on vulnerable people living adjacent to the car parks. So it's great to see that Katie has just mentioned that in the chat. And, so it'd be wonderful to be able to reach out and discuss this with Naomi and Becky going forward, and with anybody else who might be on the same journey as ourselves.
Yeah, happy to do that. Happy to have a chat. No problem.
Thanks.
Yeah, very happy. I'm assuming you can get our email. I'll put in my email address in the chat, but yeah, more than happy to have a conversation. And, if you want to use the visualizations to sort of initiate that conversation internally, then you're welcome to do so.
Thank you very much.
Oh, fantastic. And that sounds like an amazing project. I mean, you've got the iconic car park outside the Patagonia factory in California, which is covered in solar panels and has been for well over a decade now. It'd be lovely to see that, but integrated with all of the suds work, so that we make maximum benefits out of it, especially the cooling benefits, which will make the solar panels work much more effectively, which segues neatly into what Katie Medcalf first put in the chat. Katie, do you want to expand upon that? Can I get you to unmute and turn your video on?
Hi both, brilliant illustrations, really love the ideas and the range of things you've done. One thing that struck me a couple of years back when I went to a urban green infrastructure talk was the fact that suds are sometimes really disliked because they think their kids are going to drown, and how these illustrations are really useful to mitigate those sort of fears. And I just think they're so great. Have you shown them to people yet? Have you got this sort of, the teenagers like them, the old people like them, sort of, or is that
this is the next step, I think, is how do we practically do that? We started kind of in our safe zone of, sort of professional people like yourselves, to try and get that. But equally, I'm a mother, I'm a resident. Do you know what I mean? I want to see these sort of things as well. So yeah, sort of having these sort of things. I've also shared them with my inner friends and things like that, because it's something to aspire to. As I say, some of those pictures in those were from my family snaps on holiday. It's because it's things that you kind of, it's a nicer place to be, isn't it? So but we worked with Rob Colburn, who is a landscape architect, and he does an awful lot of this sort of thing. So he has that balance and understanding as well of having taken several different sort of developments through that process. And we're very mindful. We want to demonstrate what is the now and what are the challenges, but what is the art of the possible, and little things like pocket parks. And these are all happening in places like London. You have this nibbling effect. So sort of having, like I say, people are like, oh, I don't like suds, my kids are going to drown in it. Well, not all suds need to be deep sort of ditches. What they can be is sort of sort of rain gardens, and build them into like little things that kids can play with. There isn't a railing or a wall around that my kids don't want to walk upon. So why don't you incorporate that into, the everyday infrastructure that is about?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And another next step, so completely different area. We've worked on a project in the Caribbean, in British Virgin Islands, looking at data about green infrastructure across the whole island, but obviously in Road Town, in the capital, really important place to look at it. And following the work, there were some brilliant illustrations done where they had the same picture that they were showing what the trees would do, but they had temperatures on like the bits of shade and the bits of not shade, and to illustrate the impact that had. And I loved the bus stop with the green roof. It might be great to have the bus stop without the green roof and the bus stop with the green roof, and say, do you want to be 5 degrees cooler? Yeah. So that's just I mean, if you thought of doing that as a next step.
You're right. You can take them wherever you want to go, really, which is the beauty of it in a way. And I'm just going back to your point around the surds. In that after image, we thought, oh, let's put in interpretation boards as well, as an annotation, just so that sort of would provide a bit more information for people around what they're there for, what they do. So yeah, no, it's a good point about future images. I think, yeah, they can be made into whatever we want them to be, but there's lots of directions in which you can go in this. I found it quite hard just to even select the ones I was going to do, to be honest with you. But yeah, thank you very much for your
wonderful. And so quick questions for Naomi and for Nigel. You've both commissioned visualizations. Would it be possible for you to put the details of the people that produce them in the chat? Because that will then show up when we record this. Obviously there are artists and visualizers across the UK, but it'd be good to be able to start off with a couple that people could go to for quotes.
Yeah, no problem.
Wonderful, fantastic. And obviously we're building up a library of webinars with the Green Infrastructure Forum. We've got one on how to produce those street end rain gardens, which were done in London, and we've also got one on the virtual square kilometres that were built in the middle of to represent the middle of Cardiff, Newport, and Wrexham, with visualizations or modelling showing how the temperature would change into the future during heat islands. So there's the material there that people could draw from creatively to put into visualizations. We've got 2 minutes left before this webinar will automatically end. I'm hoping that people might want to come back afterwards to continue the discussion. Could we just get a quick show of hands if you're proposing to dial back in again? I will. 4. Brilliant. I will definitely restart this and then we'll see how it goes. So Nigel, you've used the virtual hand raising function. Would you unmute yourself?
It's just more of a point. How this creative process traditionally from our sector has been neglected. I can strongly advise that in all funding applications that you work in the visualization process and the costs of it at the very earliest point within funding applications.
I was going to say on that, so the idea of these visualizations is to support those initial applications, so that we've tried to make them as generic as possible to represent, as I say, the area in which we work in. So I saw you put a point in there about the natural flood management on Kazakhstan, and that is the sort of thing where we would go, this is what could be done. Can we sort of start co-designing? Can we start having a conversation about this? And then if and when we sort of go, right, okay, then we'll properly see the options, we'll start to design it, and we can then maybe, because we're like, well, it's going to impact this street, this street, this street, then do an actual visualization of that. But in this sort of warm-up period, we can use these as a kind of, this is possible. Are you interested? Are you not? It's just a conversation starter.
We're about to be cut off, but come back in a few seconds and we'll continue the conversation.